What's up, everyone? Welcome back. It's not really breakfast time. It's more like coffee time with me. I have coffee here, and hopefully you might have your coffee too. I'm trying to, get these finished and get these done because I've been really bad about it. So again, consistency, consistency, consistency. Let's be consistent. Max, actually make the videos you say you're going to make. But good topic today because I brought up yesterday. I made a post about free weights versus free weights versus machines and stuff like that. And people were asking questions about X, Y, and Z. And one of the topics that got brought up in the discussion thread was the idea of functional training. What is functional training? And again, like the debate always machines is like, oh, machines aren't functional because your body doesn't move X, Y, and Z. And this is a pretty common discussion point. People ask that question all the time. Totally a fair question. And I'm not really interested in debating whether or not that's correct or not. Is a machine less functional or more functional than weights? I don't. Free weights? I don't know. And that really isn't here for me to discuss. But I want to discuss coherency of an argument, right? Because people like to say, oh, let's do free weights because that's how our body moves in, body world, in the world we live in. And we don't have fixed axes like when we're pressing, and like that's my standard machine is a military press. I'm not sure why. That's my example. When we're in machines, right, you have fixed axes and you're not able to have freedom of movement, but in life we have freedom of movement and we should move around and stuff. And so do machines actually make our movement worse, or should we lift with weights and while we do movement? But the coherency of that argument doesn't make much sense to me, and here's why. Let me just get to that. If we're arguing that our body should move the way our body only moves in the world we live in, then weights themselves are contradictory. At least weights above like 100 pounds. You don't lift anything that's really I don't know, the last time I lifted something that was 50 pounds that was in the real world. So that argument doesn't make any sense to me. Because if the argument is machines don't allow you to be functional because it's not how your body moves, but weights allow your body to move in a more functional pattern, yet weights themselves are not functional in the sense that they actually are what we encounter in real life, I'd be more inclined to say, if you're going to take the stance machines and free weights stink, which I'm not a believer of, but if that's the argument you want to make, you at least have to then say, well, if we're not even going to move with resistance through mass in real life, and resistance in life is typically from velocity or momentum, and we should do a lot of running, jumping, change of directions, higher velocity movements, because that's more functional, because that's how load in life is created. It's created through velocity. I would actually be more understanding of that argument, right? That argument is a little more coherent. It's a little more, it's not contradictory, right? If you say, I can't do machines because machines don't allow me to have freedom of movement, well, I guess that's an argument you might want to make, sure, but then to then say we should lift weights instead because weights are more natural because that's how our body moves in real life. But in real life, we don't have mass on our back. We're not squatting anything ever. We're not dealing with a dumbbell curl. You're dealing with momentum. We're changing directions. We're shifting. We're moving laterally left and right. Our momentum, which is what our body has to overcome in order to lift weights, is typically in the weight room dictated by mass. It's mass times velocity equals momentum. So mass is what we manipulate to generate a different impulse in the weight room, impulse being force times time. Force, it's actually average force over a given period of time you apply it to create momentum, and that is what the physics nerds of us like to say and talk about when we talk about training. Like, okay, we're trying to manipulate how we produce more force, so we do that through manipulating the momentum needed to overcome this object, and in the weight room, typically that's by mass, right, mass. But in the real world, we're changing directions, we're sprinting, we cut, we shift, our momentum, our center of mass has to move left to right. That is going to be because of velocity, mass times velocity. My mass isn't changing, but my velocity is. Now, that argument, I at least could judge that. I don't agree with the argument, but it makes more sense why that is. It's a more thorough argument, put it that way. It's more not contradictory. And so one thing I really want to harp on is when we're arguing for certain things, it's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say maybe. But if you can take a firm stance in the ground about something, this or that or X, Y, and Z, the argument itself, whether it's factually correct is another debate, or whether we can find evidence for or against is fine. It needs to be not contradictory within itself. The premise of an argument cannot use evidence that contradicts the argument. The premise of the argument might be, oh, we shouldn't lift free weights or machines because that's not functional, that's not how our body moves. We should instead lift weights because that's how our body moves. Again, weights aren't natural either. Now, if you go on and take more steps and justify that argument however you want to do it, and you can make that more coherent, I'm fine, cool with it, I get it. But again, I'm not arguing that point per se. I'm just kind of discussing about how sometimes arguments are kind of silly because the evidence sometimes people apply are contradictory in of itself. And if we as a coach want to justify something, it's okay to a certain point in time to say, well, I'm not sure, but I think this is the best way to do it based on this information. And then we might say, the confidence of that statement maybe is 80%, whatever it might be, I don't know. But that's the point, right? We want to make sure that we are not A, speaking in absolutes, and B, if we are speaking in absolutes, for whatever reason you might be, I'm not a big fan of that, your evidence and information should not be contradictory. Just a thought. Wanted to share with you all. Keep it short, keep it sweet. Something I think about sometimes. I don't think about whether or not I agree with it scientifically. I think about, does that argument make sense from an argument standpoint by itself? And then maybe if that makes sense, I'll dive into it, so on. But whatever, discussion point, something to share, something to talk about. I appreciate you guys listening. I have a man bun today, by the way, because my hair is getting crazy long. Hope you guys enjoy this mad scientist look. I appreciate you all as always. Take care and enjoy.